a very special thank you to everybody
Dear
who tunes
yoga
in to the
instructor.
Justin Podcast. And I also want to give a special thanks to all my sponsors.
I got your flyer
Hear that?
for the free
That's the sound
classes.
of you creating your own destiny. While others are waiting in line for brunch, you're spending Saturday
But I
in
found
the
my
garage.
key.
Because you went to AdvancedAutoParts.com,
It
ordered a
was
platinum battery with
right
a
under the
3-year
exhaust
replacement warranty,
manifold.
picked it up in store just 30 minutes later.
Thanks
Now,
anyway.
installing a battery isn't an all-day job, but what the brunch crowd doesn't know won't hurt it. Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back on the road. Visit AdvancedAutoParts.com to learn more.
He's a pioneer and the voice for XTV East Coast. He's the XTV Hall of Famer. And now, Justin Turkey Legs brings his famous voice to the podcast world. This is Justin's podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Justin's Podcast. I'm giving you some more audio whoop ass. And, before we get started here, I just want to talk about how I was not able to produce one of my shows because we had a little mini tsunami over here. Not with external hard drives, but with this damn blasted iPhone. I don't know what the hell was the deal, but a whole lot of our stuff got erased. And so the JJ Strong podcast that I did, where we reviewed Hardcore House, has been completely erased from history, and along with a whole lot of other great stuff, from Millennium and from Romy and who knows what else, but not to worry, because I'm coming back today, after we had found that out, because we were supposed to do this over the weekend, and I was so bummed out about it. I said, Terry, we'll get together another time, man. I'm sorry, I can't do it. But today I'm feeling fine. It's a Tuesday, and I'm smoking some good weed, and I got Terry Williams from the XTV Wrestling Observer on the phone. Terry, you there with me?
I'm definitely here with you, Justin, man. I know exactly how it feels. That was such a bummer.
Yeah, but we didn't got over it, and we ready to bring you this audio whoop ass. So, but what I decided that we was gonna do today is, because I wanted to get with you to go over Action in Orlando, which I really enjoyed.
Great pay-per-view.
Yeah, and so I figured, you and I can get together and do this, and we can also do a review of the one that me and JJ did.
Hardcore House.
Yeah. So how you feel about that?
I'm definitely down for anything, man.
Well, before we get into that, won't you tell them about a little bit about what you've been doing?
Well, if you guys don't remember me, I'm Justin's former butler. He always put me to work. I was his white slave, as he called me. But yeah, besides that, I'm just, writing little sections in the XTV Observer about, the current updates and different things that's going on, the different happenings that's going on, keeping things fresh and new and innovative for the modern day fan of XTV. There's a lot of influx of talent that's going to be coming in, that is coming in, and we're just covering a whole lot of things. We're trying to make it where there's a different type of a way to where guys can get over in XTV.
Yeah, I mean, XTV, has expanded so much, Terry, over the last, several years. It's just crazy, and I think that right now is just such a pivotal time. I think that 2016 is going to be one of those years that we look back on and say, that was the genesis.
I agree with that, and it's crazy because we don't even have the game yet. So for it to be all this buzz and to maintain all this, going into XTV Mania really makes for a very special Big Bang, if you know what I'm trying to refer to.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, and that's what I'm really excited about, and I'm excited about getting with you to talk about some of our pay-per-views of yesteryear, where we wasn't doing podcasts and things like this. So, there wasn't no kind of way for this content to get out. Exactly, and that's exactly what we're hoping for at the Exerver, to be able to, hopefully create digital content and, bring more than just XTV East Coast and XTV West Coast and Channel TXG, but be able to bring all those together as one and, really brainstorming about ideas.
Need auto parts? Shop O'Reilly Auto Parts. With convenient locations nationwide and well-trained professional parts people, you can count on O'Reilly to help you get back on the road fast.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Oh my goodness, now ladies and gentlemen, now Alec is getting his ass kicked. Oh my God, this big giant man is just destroying Alec, and I gets thrown outside of the ring on the side with Sally there.
Here, Alec, take this Snickers. You don't drive when you're hungry. Better?
Better. Hungry? Grab a Snickers. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Sandra had called. Sitting here with Terry Williams, and he was just not talking about different ways of they trying to figure out how to expand XTV, and that's what things is all about here nowadays, Terry. That's why we going back here and checking out some of the West Side material of the days of not too long ago.
Exactly, man. And this night that we're going over Action in Orlando, I particularly enjoyed this, Justin. I mean, to me, it was just a night that was full of surprises, and it's to me, it's a pay-per-view that if you took it and you put it like. You made it a little bit more modern. You made it look better, and you enhanced it, which can be done with the magic of Pinnacle and Movie Maker and these different technologies that we have now. You can really, it can really stand the test of time today.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. I mean, now, you say that, but, I mean, this was done on the game 06, as was Hardcore House, which was something different for the time.
Yeah, the XTV Westside went out of their way, Justin, to make this thing look like something really special and take it back to the 06 style. For some reason or another, which you're going to have to find out later on, maybe if you can interview Tony B or, somebody that was there during the time, but find out exactly why the game wasn't used. Was it because the game wasn't working? Was it because they wanted to look different? Or, what was the cause? But, here we are, Action not in Orlando, as they joked about the whole night. Was just its own thing, and it definitely had its own look.
Yeah, and Terry, that's one thing that they would frown upon, kind of. They would say, this pay-per-view ain't all that. They would say these different things about a lot of their product, which is another reason why we going back and looking at it and they're saying, hey, let's take another look at this. Is it as bad as we think?
They start the night out with Chantel versus Dixie, and it's funny to me. It has the killer just joking about is this Action in Orlando, and he's like, what's the joke that he says? He's like, I don't know, he's like something about the last time, and he starts doing the Richard Pryor things. I really start laughing about that.
Yeah, throughout the whole night, I felt like the energy was up during this pay-per-view. It was just a great energy level going into it. You really feel the momentum. You really feel the excitement because we got these great matches. Some of which I don't really know too much about how they came about. Maybe you can help me out with that, Terry.
Well, this one right here, we have Dixie going up against Shannon. I'm sure you remember the rivalry going on between those two.
Yeah, I was expecting to see that issue where Chantel ended up in the casket.
Yeah, that was something different. That was I think this is after that. I think this is maybe before or after that. Not really sure. But, I mean, there you see Dixie, who I believe at the time was a she was not signed to the roster yet, because this was, I believe, during either 2012 or 2013, either which she was not a part of the main roster. And when she did appear, she appeared on 06, and she was just completely going through everybody in the XTV Westside locker room, and Shan was no exception.
Yeah, I got right here in my notes, not much offense by Shan. Dixie dominated Shan, multiple pin attempts, and finally hits finisher for the win.
Yeah, nothing very, very special about this. Shan, very known for being brash, talking a whole lot of trash, and, being kind of a foul-mouthed girl. But, none of that mattered when it came to Dixie, who's just straightforward smash-mouth style.
And then after that, I put technical problems during the Hume and Hogan match, but, it wasn't technical problems. It was just YouTube. Sometimes, it don't play the video, it just pause on whatever the first still image is.
Yeah, a lot of people would kind of knock this pay-per-view because of the fact of how it looks. The digital programming needing to be a bit upgraded. It could be a bit blurry at certain points. But to me, that's what made this exciting. That's what made it its own thing. The West Side for being dark. Them for having dark sense of humors and things like that. So I really enjoy the red lighting, and if you look and pay attention, Justin, every single match is kind of shot different. They have a different look. They have a different darkness, all the way up to the Charles Dean 80s Guy main event, to where it's a little bit lighter because it's the main event, but it's still a bit dark.
And I don't think that was by design. That's one of the things that I've heard the guys gripe about, was that, the production of this was not, up to par. But, you can look at some of the productions of the Bricks, and I think I brought that up with JJ Strong, that, a lot of episodes of the Bricks are just, real shabby. We filming the screen just to get the whole screen in, because sometimes, with our iPhone, when you zoom all the way in, it would it would keep on changing the fucking color, it'll get real bright. For example, the Bob and Charles Dean matchup at XTV Clash of the Champions. You see how that match is all the way through.
Yeah, but it's even though sometimes the quality is not where you guys would like it to be. For the sake of history, for the sake of hearing your voice, Justin, or Big Trunks, D-Matic, and Best on the announcing, and this time with Faz, it's just it's so great to go back in history, because you got to remember, XTV came from radio. There, it's once you guys finally discovered radio, and before that, there was no recording, and it would still go on. So for the sake of having this being marked down in history, it's just great to have these moments, because sometimes you guys don't realize, but you guys are killing it. For example, Summer Break 2011, I think it was, Summer Break, and you guys didn't think that you did great, but it's a pay-per-view, the whole thing's documented, and damn it, it's historical.
Yeah, you can go back on the XTV network. Oh, not the network. XTV West Side, East Coast rather, and I think that's where Summer Break is. So much great content. But let's get into this Hume and Hogan match, Terry. I've got Servants use teamwork to defeat Hume and Hogan for a quick loss.
Yeah, another one where, it really wasn't much to talk about here. The thing about the West Coast is that everything is kind of a spectacle. They have guys that are so special that it's just great to see these guys. It's a little bit like old school wrestling. Hume Monster comes out during the second match. It kind of went back to their old school style of the first match is a one-on-one match. Even though it wasn't a draws match, it was a Divas match. The second match, the tag team match. Those sneaky servants, Brian Strand and Chad something. I can't remember his name. But those guys are, one of my favorite teams to watch in XTV because these guys actually get it. These guys are actually one of the teams that actually implement teamwork when it comes to tag team wrestling. Everything they do it as a team, and that showed in this matchup. They both were just on the money, keeping Monster and Hulk Hogan, who were seemed to be very discombobulated as a team, did not function well, and they used that against them. And at the end of the day, it was those sneaky servants, with the double team, going behind the referee's back and doing different things, using different tactics, and that's what helped them achieve the victory in this match.
Yeah, and then they go on to get the win. This storyline will continue later on down the line, and it builds up into a rivalry and then into a feud that kind of boils over at the next pay-per-view that we're going to talk about, Hardcore House. But that was pretty much the end of that. Then following that, you have Big Trunks, D-Matic, and Best sitting at the table there, talking about what has happened up to this point during the pay-per-view. Two matches that in my opinion, just there to warm you up, just there to get you ready for the night, because that the big ones is coming. One of the main matches was ODD versus
versus the Killer.
Yeah. Versus the Killer. Then there was Wells versus Best. And then, of course, the main event, Charles Dean going one-on-one up against 80s guy. But after this, we saw a little montage of another match that was scheduled for that night. And at the time, Terry, this was a big deal. Big Trunks, D-Matic, and The Pain.
Oh man, I laughed so hard. I can't believe that the West Side is so hard on themselves. If they only knew, if they could step outside of themselves and look at, the things that they produce, it's just like, are you serious? Does that not make you die of laughter? And I know how it is. It's like, because when you create something, Justin, you're your worst critic. But at the end of the day, man, it's that little bit more effort to make a show special and to make a show unique and to make it not just about wrestling and have a little bit of ha-ha in there. The Big Trunks and Pain training montage I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, I did too, man. I laughed my ass off, and it's like they wanted to do like a little montage, and they wanted to make it seem like they wanted to make it a little bit longer, to be able to compare it to how real wrestling is. But damn it, just that little clip was just enough for me, and I lost it.
Yeah, because you got to remember, all these years going back and then looking at it again, you forget those little things like that. Like, there's even things on the East Coast, like if you check out an episode of The Bricks, you're not just getting 4 matches, you're not just getting 4 segments. There are little bits in there, there are little treasures in there that are just so funny, that you just put those little things in there and it just changed the whole tone and just makes the event that much more better.
Okay, and then coming from there, we had Wells going one-on-one up against Best. Two guys that are more than likely to give you a great matchup, and they did not fail in doing that on this time.
No, they did not. Coming straight out the gate, you see Wells getting his move at a really early point, and that used to surprise me sometimes on 06. How some guys could just get their moves earlier than other guys. And what that indicated to me, Justin, was that, you're dealing with a guy who's just not just a regular person, but a cut above the rest, a little bit better than average. And, that's why Wells could never be played as a jobber, because he was just too good. And with like 1 or 2 hits already, he's so, whether it's the fact that he's so over or I don't know what, but for some reason he got that special early, coming in, hitting Best with a hyper combo, then hitting them with the Undertaker tombstone. I mean, this guy's moveset is just off the hook. He's one of those guys that every single thing that he does, that it hurts because it looks like it. and everything is just so believable.
Yeah, he got that hood style, and Faz mentioned in this matchup, this was the tale of a ninja style versus a hood nigga style, if you will. Those wasn't Faz's words, but that's what it was in this matchup. And if you was there in the 90s, if you was a kid who grew up in the 90s, you remember that everything was ninja this, ninja that. That was the thing, to be a ninja. And modern day shit, it's all about this kind of hood, pants sagging, as my good friend Trunks would say, type of hey.
I love when he does that.
Yeah, but and Faz mentioned that the ninja style versus just the hardcore style, and both of these guys was able to get things off that was not outside of their way of fighting, and make a story that made sense.
Absolutely, everything was just it makes sense, and if you take the time to go back to this matchup and just see the way everything flowed, it's actually like in my match, or in my book, the match of the night, a 5-star matchup.
Yeah, that's what I got here. I got perfect finish. Wells was selling that he had been in a hell of a contest. Then he hit the spear out of nowhere and gets the pin.
Yeah, that's just so perfect. After this long, grueling contest, back and forth, for about 15 minutes or so. I'm not sure how long it was.
It was about a 10-minute match.
Yeah, but it felt like it though. It felt like like this great solid matchup, which it was. These guys going back and forth. Wells dishing out a lot of punishment. Best showing a.
For those addicted to being in the garage and under the hood, Advance Auto Parts introduces Speed Perks, a new rewards program. Spend $30 and get $5 back on your next qualifying purchase. Real rewards, real fast. It's about time you get rewarded, really rewarded, for doing what you love. New Speed Perks from Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back to the garage.
See store to sign up or visit speedperks.com for details.
Oh my God, we missed another trains. This is bullshit. Every full damn time, God. Babe, here, take your sneakers. Why? Because you want to like yourself when you hungry. Betters?
Better. Hungry? Grab a Snickers. We back here, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for cutting you off yet again, Terry.
It's perfectly fine. I was just talking about how Best was just really fighting back in this matchup, and not just fighting back, but holding his own up against Wells. But I think that Wells dominated in a way that just proved, that he's just on that next level, and it was just a great finish, the way that you said. It's just, both of these guys, fought great, but, just that little small moment, that pause at the end, where Wells is just like staggering, and then out of nowhere hits that spear and KO's Best. It's just perfect.
No, he didn't KO him. He speared him, and then he went for the pin. Which was, to me, just that classic win, that classic, oh man, his hair sweating, and roll over and go to the outside of the ring, and just leave it all, on the mat.
It was awesome, man. Definitely my favorite matchup on the entire card.
After that, we got DT versus Dead, and this was the first thing that they said in this match. Well, the first thing Trunks said in this match is, here's basically a squash match or something like that.
I remember that, and it's just so unique and so funny how, it turned out, because that was completely not the case in this matchup. Here's Dead, we see, as this dominant force to be reckoned with. He has this history in SIDE and was able to bring that over here in XTV and still be as dominant as he ever was. And he wasn't the biggest monster of them all, but he was definitely the deadliest, hence the name Dead.
Yeah, and I got a false finish here. I think that's how the matchup started off early. A bit of a false finish. I think that was a big move, but to no avail. Immediately, in no time, you have DT and Dead going up the cell. You see them scaling up the cell side by side. Dead with a little bit more of an edge, but I think that's what made him be able to throw off DT first. DT was the one that took the first lick, but you got to keep in mind while you're watching this matchup the whole time that everybody is under the impression that DT has absolutely no chance. And I particularly want to point out a particular point in this matchup where Trunks is talking about that's so nasty, referring to DT and his draws. Motherfucker, how the hell you think we feel? You always talking about some shit nasty and referring to somebody else when they in their draws. That's what you do.
I don't understand the whole point of why it matters anyways. Whether or not you're able to beat Dead in your drawers or not in your drawers, it shouldn't matter. The fact is that you're able to beat Dead. I mean, I wrestled in my drawers too. No one cared.
Yeah, well, you was a little bit different. You running really over Terry.
Point taken.
But yeah, you got any thoughts on this matchup?
The thing I like about this match in particular, is that coming off of such a great match, Wells and
Best.
Yeah, then they bring this part. I think it's great booking by whoever put this card together, because here you have the gimmick matchup, the Hell in a Cell, Dead versus DT, and it's like I said at the beginning of the show. This night was so full of surprises, and for DT to be able to pull a victory over Dead, it's just like absolutely insane. And you can hear the disbelief in Big Trunks' announcing when he said DT beat Dead. It's just like, wow, it was not expected. And the thing about this matchup too that I really like is it goes back to the visuals, how it had just that red lighting around it, and and if you really take another look at it, if you watch this matchup, it really looks like DT's in hell. It really looks like he's went into Dead's domain, and he's fighting, and it just looks real smoggy in there, real dark and real hellacious with that grand structure surrounding both of those guys. And it's like you said, Justin, DT thrown off of the cell first, really making you not believe even more. But you see as he fights, and he fights kind of like how Wells does. It's that hood, that street thing, and that pride and that bravery and that heart, and that's what he took out there. And after this matchup, this was what made DT, a staple in XTV, because after this match, you could not say that DT was not a force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. That's what this matchup was all about, whether we realize it or not. This is and DT was already well in, but he made it official that on 06 I was able to defeat Dead, because 06 is where it counts. 06 is where it matters in many cases. It was just the ultimate test. And going back to that game, I remember when we first got it, we didn't like how it was because it was such a slower pace. And then going back looking at this pay-per-view, it's very fast paced. You know what I mean? Looking at a whole lot of the sequences, which we'll get to later on in that 80s guy versus Charles Dean match. But that's what I noticed. But this game paid very much attention to certain technicalities and holds, to make it feel like he was really in a hold or submission and different things like that. I don't know what the hell point I was trying to make, but anyways, yeah. 06 good.
Yeah, so, DT definitely held his own in that matchup, and, definitely props to him, pulling off. I think he threw him off the side of the cell, finished off dead, and pinned him on the side of the cell. And I just want to say one more thing before we move on. It's just that, this was the last time that we saw Dead in action, and you gotta wonder, was Dead going out there and doing the favor for DT, and putting him over in his last match before he kind of rides off into the sunset, and then kind of making DT's career, really means so much more, because here we have it recorded and he's riding off. And if you look at the way Dead fought, I don't think that this is the same Dead that we saw fight up against us, or the days of yesteryear when he was going up against Flamindo.
Yeah, that's a good point, Terry. It was a different Dead. He didn't seem as dominating, but at the same time, you could argue that point by saying that DT just came out there swinging, fighting for his life. The old Dead, would have stopped that DT or been able to slow him down, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's a good call.
You just have to wonder, was he older in age, or what is it, that made that happen? If there's more to the story than just what meets the naked eye.
Well, that's something to keep in mind. The match after that, I was very, very happy to see Ada come out to the ring. She was just a great addition to the show, and I think that she even came out to TLC.
I'm not so sure the music that she came out to, but it was definitely a great addition. She wrestled up against Trish Stratus, who was carrying the women's championship, and I thought that it would have been real cool if we could see the women's championship change hands. Although, back in the 06 days, those championship belts were just worn for props and not necessarily for, being able to put up for grabs, if I'm not mistaken.
You could put up titles for grabs, but I ain't so sure how that used to work. It was so long ago. But, pretty much a squash match. When I seen who Ada's opponent was, I already knew it would be a squash. 7-minute match, if you include the entrances. Even they said that in the announcing. And, for me, the announcing is what really gets you through this matchup. This is, to me, Terry, a matchup where, you see a lot of you see what makes XTV West great. You know what I'm saying? How the camaraderie between Faz, Killer, MZ, Big Trunks, and the Best, all sitting there, calling this matchup.
Yeah, it's just the XTV West Side has always had that. They've always had this thing, whether they realize it or not. They're this tight-knit, close family, and they interact with each other in a way that's completely different from the XTV. The XTV East Coast, not completely different, but slightly different. There's ways, of course, you can see influence of yourself over there, and even Bob Classic. But I think that having Faz at the announce table and MZ, really adds a different dynamic and really makes it their own thing.
Yeah, and Faz mentioned, speaking of Faz, that Ada was supposed to fight Orchid, which would have been so much more of a bigger match, but I think that some type of tsunami, kind of like what happened with our iPod, may have happened to one of their memory cards, and thus leading to having Ada versus Trish. So this was not no special attraction match. This was actually supposed to be a legit battle. That's why it's later on the card. Ada's a big name, and if she would have wrestled Orchid, oh my God, that would have been crazy.
Orchid, another one of those special women, one of those special superstars on the West Coast, and I think she even spent a bit of time in the East Coast. But she's an original Killer Instinct girl, and her style was so crazy on Killer Instinct, and she was able to bring that over here in XTV, and for her to be able to wrestle Ada is definitely like a dream match, a match that we still haven't had, Justin, and a match that could happen at XTV Mania.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys don't know, Terry Williams, Terry Williams is the is the guy who does the intro of my my illustrious podcast, and you just now remind me of that. Can you do it for me real quick, Terry?
I don't even know what he says. He's considered the greatest. He's considered the greatest announcer of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, with his famous friends, this is Justin's podcast.
Yeah, you botched it all up, but that's good enough. Oh man. Oh man. So we continue tonight. And it's a good time, ladies and gentlemen. I got right here in my notes, great commentary all night. I'll talk about the camaraderie. Squash match. Ada, of course, comes out on top. I put the event would not be the same without Ada. And I also got notes about DT, who's at this point doing a lot of bragging on his match win up against Dead. I like the quote he said, "Hate to spoil the old milk." It's just like one of those perfect lines, those one-liners. It's just like, where the hell did you hear that shit from?
Yeah, he's really, really doing a whole lot of gloating at this point, and nobody can say anything about it, whether they want to or not. Everybody's just letting him have his moment, letting him shine, because he's the man right now, and he won. He won that matchup fair and square, threw him off the side, pinned the man 1, 2, 3.
And then so following the Ada matchup, I got not 5 stars, but Ada is awesome. Got that in my notes there. And then I got Killer versus ODD. That's the match that came up next. ODD came out. This motherfucker was huge.
Yeah, that's what makes me think that this might have been 2012 when The Rock, who was ODD's idol, came out to wrestle up against John Cena at WrestleMania 28. And it's the size of The Rock, and that's what they were portraying here. ODD making his comeback, going up against Killer. This was a big matchup, and I think that this was a big deal to the West Coast because ODD is such a legend. One of the first guys like yourself and like Romy Rome coming from that time period, and it's unfortunate what happened to him in his later years, but here he is making a comeback, and I really thought that it wasn't really fair how he was being treated, as the Killer, they skipped over his entrance. He comes out, and the Killer's animated as usual. But then, throughout the whole time that ODD's making his entrance and slowly walking to the ring, as we're, able to just be able to inhale and breathe in the legendary that is the Old Dirty Dog. And the whole time, the Killer is just shooting him down and just destroying him, calling him an old man like Terry Funk, and just, saying different things like that, shooting him down. I thought that really took away from how big this matchup could have been.
Yeah, I got that too. Killer was going in on ODD ass, and he made him seem like a jobber. And to Terry Williams' point, this was a later matchup, but it wasn't just that, because throughout the whole matchup, Killer squashed ODD. There was just a few spots here where ODD was able to summon up some offense, whether it was physically or verbally, as Killer just turned this into a one-man show. And you could, if you could just take out the wrestling and just play the black screen, you could put this on one of Killer comedy albums, because he's just going on his whole spiel. And it's kind of going back to like what I was saying at the top, how it's just so much energy in this, and Killer is a main part of it. You hear him throughout the whole night, just joking and making fun of people, and making fun of the situation that they're not in Orlando, and overall just being Killer.
Yeah, it's like a one-man show, and just to me, it could have been so much more than that. To me, it could have been ODD and Killer. Here's the big comeback guy. And he's getting in the young guy's face. But it just seems like in so many situations, the Killer is not willing to put guys over. The Killer is not willing to embellish a guy's legacy and help him really get over and shine the way he ought to, but instead he has to tear them down with words. And to his credit also, though, that's what makes him who he is. That's what makes you hate him, and that's what puts him in his own lane. But it's just very selfish, if you ask me. When you think about the overall situation and how things are supposed to be, how everybody can benefit from XTV and the exposure, but then to just to shut somebody down at a big moment in a big night situation like this, it's just really low class.
And Killer has not been one to be known as the classiest. Then coming up next, we got Big Trunks, D-Matic, and Pain going one-on-one just right across the street, I believe, at a little carnival that was going on. And this is a special attraction that took place over there. Also a part of the main card. One of the biggest matches that everybody was looking forward to. I know we was on the East Coast. This was probably the biggest matchup that we wanted to see on the card, besides the main event, of course, Charles Dean and Hades guy. But he had the returning Pain going up against Trunks, and who we all thought Pain had no chance. He was washed up. He was a crackhead, and Trunks, was our guy. He was the man, and he shocked us.
Big Trunks D-Matic went out there as a fan favorite, really feeling very confident, talking a lot of trash the entire night. And, as soon as that bell rung, it was not too much longer after that we see Big Trunks just put on his keister, and that really woke him up and made him realize who he was in the ring with. And you can see there from that point that he begins to become alarmed, because he realizes that he's going up against a prepared boxer, a prepared and trained fighter, and a man that if need be will kill him. And I believe that Big Trunks was very scared and nervous, as we saw at XTV Mania.
I just don't understand why in the hell Trunks put himself in these type of situations. It was very clear that he didn't train, and it was so evident early in this match. I mean, not even after the first round, not even into the first 3 rounds, but the first damn round, the first few damn moments. First, like Terry said, he got knocked out. Then, Big Trunks, he headbutt the Pain. You know what I'm saying? He headbutted the Pain, which caused Old Joe to have to reset the match because the referee threw it out. He restarted the matchup, and it just gets back to Trunks avoiding low blows, avoiding headbutts, and Pain just showing them that I'm not here to play. I'm gonna fuck something up.
It's just crazy, man. Just seeing Big Trunks, this great hero, this great icon, fall and dwindle before our eyes. But we weren't willing to believe that. We had Big Trunks versus Pain too, which I believe is on the next event. And you see how that went on.
Well, no, I think that Big Trunks actually might have won that one. I think he won. I think it was controversial, but at that one at Hardcore House, we didn't get to see the footage because it's a little bit off. But yeah, I got here in my notes, man, I laughed the whole time. I laughed my ass off. I was sitting up there enjoying the hell out of this matchup. I probably wouldn't have laughed so much, or maybe I would have though if it was at the time, because Trunks was talking so much shit, and he just knew it, and he talked so much shit that he had us confident that he was gonna win, and we was gonna be in this corner anyways because he was our guy. But man, when that shit just got flipped and just seeing him take that punishment and all that, oh man, I lost it. This was, to me, Terry, we always talk about match of the night, but this was the funniest match on the card.
Well, I'm sure that you're going to hear about that, Justin.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I will. But damn it, he was right. He was sitting right there. As a matter of fact, at the time when I was watching this matchup, he was sitting right there, and I was laughing my ass off, and he was mad then. But I don't give a damn. That shit was funny.
And then after this matchup, it's just like DT. You had mentioned once before on another occasion that DT is like the new Pain. But after this matchup, you saw the Pain. You saw the Pain and just a glimpse of who he is, who he's always been, as he was just bragging after his matchup that he beat the man, overcame the odds, overcame what everybody had said, and he called out certain names like Bobby and, maybe, I don't know if he called you out, but, just everybody that had something negative to say, or everybody that didn't believe in him, it's like, up yours, back in your face, I'm still the man, and it doesn't matter what you think, because I just now defeat your hero.
Absolutely. And as I was watching, and the Pain, was talking this trash, I was saying to myself that, that's the Pain I remember. That's DD, who used to get in front of the TV and fucking, piss me off because I wanted to see the cheeseburger on the Burger King commercial. That annoying ass little runt. It took me back to that because he was the type of guy who could get under your skin and piss you off and then beat you, and then you couldn't do nothing about it. And that's what he did with Big Trunks here in this case, and he did it to so many other people. He did it to Bob, and he was able to take his spot back that he had deserved all along, that had been taken from him, because we thought that since he was a cracked out rockhead and he had fell off at one point, that he was at the point of no return. But he proved us all wrong on this night.
Exactly, a night full of surprises, as I said, man. And Pain didn't cease to bring him his damn self.
I feel you struggle. You like me in 2012 over there.
Dear yoga instructor, I got your flyer for the free classes, but I found my chi. It was right under the exhaust manifold. Thanks anyway.
Wow, kids, there's so many cars out here, I just don't know which one to choose from. Yeah, I know, there's so many Jeff Hardys out here that I don't know who to choose from. Ernie, here, take this. Wag ass. Because you act delusional when you're hungry. Better. Much better. You're not you when you're hungry. Hungry? Why wait? Grab a Snickers.
And finally, in our main event, 80s Guy going one-on-one up against Charles Dean. This is the first time that we ever seen these guys in action. The hype had to be through the roof, Terry.
Exactly, and you could feel the intensity. I mean, the 80s Guy comes out first. He's the heavyweight champion of the world, and he's defending up against Charles Dean. He's defending the heavyweight championship, the championship that he held for so long, and then that he sustained and beat everybody in a pay-per-view at the year prior. And here he is now going up against, after he's defeated all the top guys on the East Coast, he's going up against the biggest man on the the West Coast, Charles Dean, his biggest opponent probably of all time. This is the first time that these two iconic guys are going up against each other on this monumental occasion here at Action Orlando, or should I say Action Not in Orlando. And man, when you talk about a show stealer, a barn burner, this is definitely it.
Yeah, you talk about matches of the night. This was my match of the night, and why wouldn't it be? No surprise. Anytime I start talking about the '80s guy and just how great he is and how entertaining he is, it always just gives me the chills. I like in this matchup how they used the classic '80s guy entrance theme music, and just implementing that, and it go back, Terry, those small things that they use to make it different. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think in the other pay-per-view, Hardcore House, I think that they used Charles Dean's entrance music from Day of Reckoning. So, just little things like that are just so cool when it comes to these pay-per-views. And then, getting into this matchup, 80s guy, going in there, going right at Charles Dean, using his quickness, using his speed. And then, in the early part of the matchup, there's a part where Charles Dean is outside of the ring and the 80s guy jumps and does a swanton trying to hit the 80s guy, and the 80s guy hurts himself, and he actually did, and on his way out, as he's flying through over the top rope, he knocks over the referee, and then when he gets back in, classic 80s guy style, boy toy troughing and stomping that referee, and like 80s guys is one of the few heels that can actually pull off something like that.
Yeah, he definitely is. He just want to be Shawn Michaels, and we eat up every minute of it. I got here in my notes. Great striker, by 80s guy. He's just like, he just keeps on punching and punching and punching. I mean, he had to throw like 1,000 punches, and he might have landed like, maybe half of them, but Charles Dean, in this matchup, it's just that David and Goliath story almost. And, you hate to make it seem that way, but 80s guy is a smaller guy. He does have to fight, harder, which is at his disadvantage. I got that, he struggled to maintain an advantage. In addition to the fact that he's a great striker, it's like boom, 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 punch. But Charles Dean, cut him off. And, Charles Dean is not even a heel. But, I guess in this matchup, and you can tell me what you think about it. But in this match, Charles Dean seemed to not, to take more of a heel role.
Well, not necessarily a heel, but it's just that I think that, people get behind the 80s guy so much, and they want to cheer for him and root for him so much, and he's their guy, he's our guy, so we're going to cheer for him, and we want to see him win. When he's in that deficit up against so much of a bigger opponent, to see these moves that he pulls off, in spite of taking like a heavy power bomb, or a great haymaker or a clothesline from hell by Charles Dean. In spite of that, being able to see him pull through and, maybe reverse or do something like that, that's what makes you want to cheer for him. So it's not necessarily booing Charles Dean or thinking that he's bad. It's not like, screw you, Dean, but it's more like we love our 80s guy and we don't want to see him get beat up.
Yeah, this is great booking because, I talked with Yaki once before, and, we talked about how it's tough to put a babyface versus a babyface, but this was a match that had to happen. When you look around the card, there at the time there was probably no bigger main event than Charles Dean versus the 80s guy. This matchup had to happen, and It absolutely delivered. I got everything that Dean does hurts. Every punch. So when it's to your point, Terry, every time when Charles Dean would hit the 80s guy, that it's taking out a significant amount of power. As where when Charles Dean was striking, or when 80s was striking Charles Dean, not so much. And that's what I meant by, he's throwing like all these punches, hundreds and hundreds of punches, but it's just like, it just didn't seem like it was wearing him down too much.
Well, I think that sometimes with Charles Dean is that he's so tough that...
Oh, that's these motherfuckers over here doing some shit.
Oh, well, it's just that Charles Dean is so tough that it seems like he just doesn't want to sell that he's hurt. He's one of those guys. He's gonna still walk upright. He's not gonna limp, but he's in pain, but he can just endure it. He's just that tough. But I think that what 80s guy does definitely hurts. I think that like you said, he's a great striker, and he's been in the business for a long time, won many championships. So it's just that what he does, it might not look like it hurt, but it hurts a whole lot more than what it looks like.
Well, I tend to disagree. I feel like, his moves are just so fancy, but they just don't affect you, and then, that's what he was doing. He was doing all these flying tilt-a-whirls. They look great, he did the one spot where, the guy laying in the middle of the ring, and then he go to the rope and do the cartwheel and then the backflip. And, the thing I like about it is that these are the types of moves that actually save 80s guy. They actually buy him time, because you see that Dean is coming at him, with these great massive strikes. And he's like just this big ass damn bulldozer, just this taking 80s guy head off and just knocking the wind out of him every time that he punches. But when 80s guy fights back and he's making that comeback and he's pulling off these fancy moves where he's jumping on his head and doing hurricanranas, that buys him enough time and keeps Dean off his rocker just long enough for 80s guy to maybe get in a taunt to where he can get his move. And it's just like, it's stuff like that is so exciting to me that it just keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Absolutely, Justin. This matchup was back and forth. I mean, here's another case where, you feel like you just now watched a 30-minute match or a 20-minute match, and it's only about 10 minutes, but, so much is told, in such a fast period of time. I think that, if you would take this matchup, and, this is on the 06 PlayStation game console, but if you would take this match and you would slow it down into maybe real time, into, like how real people move, I think that it would actually look like a real wrestling matchup. I mean, it does look like a real wrestling match, and the 80s guy and Charles Dean just completely tore the roof off. One of the things that I was also impressed with is how 80s guy, it's kind of like what you were saying about the fancy moves. 80s guy is able to connect with the most impossible moves. He's got a dragon kick off the top rope. You know how hard that is to hit. That's not a very offensive move, and you don't even jump very far when you do it. But the 80s guy was able to connect with a dragon kick. He has a swanton bomb from inside the ring where he dives outside the ring. Another move where he's able to, affect his opponent, get his special moves, and we can hit that super kick, which we know can turn your head red in no time. And that's his advantage. I think his advantage is his speed, his quickness, and his the fact that he's such a fan favorite.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I got big moves by Dean, quick moves by 80s. And then I got 80 survived the F5 with a possum pin.
Oh, man. Such a highlight of the match, because everything is like, it's like we established. You're on the edge of your seat. You're watching this matchup, and everything's going back and forth. You want your guy, 80s guy, to win, but when you see that F5 is hit, and I don't care who Charles Dean has been in the ring with, when you see him hit that F5, especially on 06, and it turns gray and everything slows down for a minute, once you see that guy hit, if he's not KO'd, you know that when he's pinned, that it's gonna be a 3 count. Very rarely does anybody ever kick out of that F5. And, I think that 80s guy knew that. And he had the wherewithal. He's so ring smart that when Charles Dean came over and went for that pin, 80s guy comes with the possum pin. He hits 1, 2, and damn it, almost like 1/4 or 3/4 and a half, of a 3. It was so close.
it pissed me off with that damn Kyoto to see that happen because, you know, when those possum pins would happen so often, Mike Chioda would be out of position, which he was, and for that half a second that Chioda was out of position, that was the half a second I feel that 80s guy needed to be able to pull off this victory, and he probably would have upset Charles Dean, which would have made this so crazy.
Yeah, that would have been a great finish if it was over like that. But I think it was a great false finish that really surprised everybody. And even at the announce team, you know, I think you see Big Trunks D-Matic take the screen and it's like, is this being recorded? Because this is so great. For 80s guy to still live and survive that possum pen after this deficit that you know he's in. You know, he's fighting. You know, it's like watching Jackie Chan fight. You know, it's like, oh man, you know, he's ducking and dodging everything. You know, and then, you know, he might have a couple cuts on his face to where he was scathed, but he's still in this thing. He's still fighting.
Yeah, and then, you know, so after the possum pen, 80s guy, you know, he makes a bit of a comeback. You know, not things are his favor. Now things are in his favor. Then he goes for that sweet chin music, but Charles Dean was able to duck it. So now, you know, 80s guys lost his finisher, and then he comes back at Charles Dean. Quick thinking again, hits that Shining Wizard, and he hit that Shining Wizard so hard that it's like he might as well had to hit the super kick.
Yeah, that's one of his signature moves. That Shining Wizard, 80s guy performed so well, and you know that's a mean move that can really do a whole lot of damage. And then, you know, you start to see 80s guy, you know, kind of fighting for his life. He's just swinging and missing a whole lot. Charles Dean just dodging everything. You know, 80s guy giving it all he has, but he just coming up with a whole lot of air. And then he lands this epic super kick, you know, after fighting. You know, Charles Dean, although, you know, he was causing 80s guy to miss by ducking and dodging, it was still hard for him to get on offense because he's got all these kickers and punches and flying, spinning wheel kicks and chops just swinging at him. It's hard to defend yourself up against that. And so he got struck a couple times, and times enough to where he was able to get dazed, and 80s guy just hits that super kick, and you just see that shot, Justin, of, you know, it just going in slow motion, and it's just that picture perfect shot that we have in XTV magazine where 80s guy just takes him out. And here you hope that Charles Dean or that 80s guy can pin Charles Dean for the win, but still to no avail.
Yep. You know, Charles Dean got on the up and up. He struck the 80s guy, you know, punched him. You know, I think he either had his moves or, you know, he had his move already, or he hadn't gained his move, but he was just, you know, punching him with those clubbing blows, and you see 80s guy kind of bouncing from pillar to post, and, you know, Dean had him in his hands, and once he got 80s guy on the ground, he just takes his arms and he stretches them over his face in this unique submission move that I don't even know the name of, but 80s guy, he had nowhere to go. There was nowhere, you know, no way for him to reverse this, and he had no choice but to give up.
Yeah, and not only that, but you have to also point out the fact that, you know, the 80s guy was able to get in yet another super kick. So Charles Dean survived kind of 3 super kicks. He ducked the first one, and then he took the last 2. But you know, that just shows the toughness of Charles Dean. And, you know, they would go on to wrestle again in an Iron Man match at Hardcore House.
Yeah, which was another epic matchup. Terry, you know, we sat here talking about this shit so long. This is supposed to be where we was able to talk about both of them in one show, but I think we went over a little bit too long, so we're gonna have to make this a 2-parter. Hopefully you'll come back with me and you and I can go over Hardcore House together.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely, because that was a good one as well.
Before we roll out of here, Terry, you know, I would like to know what's your thoughts on a 5-star rating. How many stars would you give this pay-per-view?
Definitely. I would definitely give it about 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah, definitely 4 out of 5 stars. I think that this was a solid pay-per-view. It was so fun from the very beginning. You know, minus like a couple little things like the only reason why I wouldn't give it 5, which is so close to having 5 stars, but it's just that, like, to me, a 5-star would be like where every match is like a 5-star match. And, every match wasn't 5-star, but every match told the story. Every match, made sense. It made a difference. And, that's what I would give it.
Yeah, I had the same thing in mind. To me, the quality kind of bothered me. I know you said that you enjoyed it. It was different for you, but I would like to see a clearer picture. Because I know XTV has got events where the event is picture perfect. Because the visuals were streamed from a feed, so I would like to see more of that. I think great solid announcing. I would like to hear more of the crowd. I wish that the crowd would be more into it, because the crowd tells so much of the story, and in those exciting parts and in those exciting points of the Charles Dean 80s Got matchup, the crowd was really losing it, and they was really getting into it, but you couldn't pick that up because it wasn't loud enough. Not so loud to where you drowning out the announcing, which I absolutely loved the whole night, but just loud enough to where we can hear it and you can feel it. You can feel that matchup even more.
I think that's a great point.
Well, I'm so glad that you did this with me, Terry. And we're gonna come back and do this again next week. We're gonna do Hardcore House. Sorry, JJ. We're gonna have to get together another time. It's too bad we just sat there and did that for nothing. But until next time, I'm Ernest Justin Turkey Leg. Thank you again to my illustrious guest, Terry Williams. And I'll see y'all.